bearing the image, announcing to everyone who they were and to stay away. Since some of the knights had bows as well as swords, Owen kept his mouth shut for more than one reason. The boy lost track of time as they rode. Several days had passed. Each morning the Duke would jostle him awake at dawn, frown at him, and lead him back to the horse. Owen said nothing. The Duke said nothing. It was like that all the way to Kingfountain. When Owen was 3 years old, he had come to the royal city of Severn Argentine with his family. Enough time had passed that he only had vague snatches of the memory, but as they approached the city from the main road, those little memories began to fuse together, and it looked vaguely familiar. What was striking about Kingfountain was that it had been built around a vast river just at the point where the ground sharply gave way to a raging waterfall. No matter how swollen or low the river was, the waterfall never stopped. There was a large island in the middle of the river where a sanctuary had been constructed, Our Lady of Kingfountain. Huge boulders and rocks emerged from the falls, some with spindly trees somehow clinging to them in spite of the surge of foaming water. Owen knew the building bore that name because of legends from the past, but none of his reading had been able to explain it to him in as much detail as he wanted. The texts he had tried reading to learn more were full of knights, battles, and disparate kingdoms that no longer existed, but they were written in a style too long and boring to hold his interest. The sanctuary had 2 sturdy towers and a series of arches that loomed over the back shell of the building. The waterways under the arches always flowed, making the sanctuary a replica of the waterfall itself. On one bank of the river lay the city proper, with its wedge-shaped roofs and smoking chimneys. The noise of bleating goats, lowing oxen, and trundling carts and wagons was barely discernible through the constant roar of the waterfall. On the other bank of the river, on the high ground, stood the palace, and it made Tatton Hall seem like a toy in comparison. A stone bridge connected the palace to the island, and several wooden bridges connected the island to the main shore and the rest of the city. It was a breathtaking sight, and Owen kept leaning in the saddle to get a better view. The rushing of the waterfall could be heard from miles away, the steady churn of waves that sounded like a constant storm. The palace was built on a green hill full of lush woods and had many tiers and layers, with sharp-edged walls and easily a dozen turrets flying the royal banners. Owen could see gardens and trees rising above portions of the old stone walls, and to his inexperienced eye it looked as if the castle had stood for thousands of years. Still, the facade was free of ivy or vines and had been meticulously kept. So this would be his new home. The king had summoned Owen to live in the palace as his ward. Owen's older brother, Jorganon, had also lived at Kingfountain for a time, and now he was dead. Was that why Maman and Papan had wept so much when Owen left? The palace did not feel like a home. It felt like a monument, a relic of the ages, a dangerous place. As they rode into the city, they were announced by trumpets at the gate, and Owen found himself stared at by hundreds of strangers. Some looked at him with pity, which made him even more uncomfortable and shy, and he buried his face in the Duke's cloak to hide. The hooves clopped against the cobbles as they rode through the city and the omnipresent noise from the falls. Eventually, Owen peeked out again and stared down at the shops and swarms of people. He soaked in the sights, unable to comprehend the massive size of such a place, his senses overwhelmed by the noise and confusion. He tried to stifle his emotions, but he found himself crying, his heart breaking with sadness that none of his family was there to shelter him. Why had he been chosen to go to Kingfountain? Why not one of the others? Horwath became aware of his little sobs after a while and turned in the saddle to look down at him.
"What is it, boy?"
he asked gruffly, his goatee bending into a frown. Owen looked into his eyes, afraid to say anything at all, let alone reveal his true feelings. He tried to stifle his tears, but that only made them worse.